Welcome back, everybody, to Watcher of All Things. My name is Kiki, and this is my podcast where I talk movies, TV shows, and all things entertainment. And today, it is episode 91, where we are not talking Begonia. A little bit of a schedule change. That did not come out till Friday night, so I didn't have a chance to see it Thursday night. Instead, I saw Shelby Oaks, the new Chris Stuckmann directorial debut, which is going to be the focus of today's episode. I'm very excited to chat about it. But before we get to Shelby Oaks, I hope you are all doing well. It is an amazing fall day here on a sunny Sunday in Toronto. A few things to plug before we get into the episode. This Friday, on Halloween Friday, there will be a new YouTube video all about The Batman Part 2, including what we know, my theories, as well as fan casting. It's a lot of fun. I finished it last night, actually, very late on Saturday night, and there's a lot of good stuff in there that I'm very excited for. Knowing my luck, the day that the video comes out, Matt Reeves is going to reveal everything about the movie. Yeah, that's just perfect timing for me, as well as today, timestamps below. If you don't want to know anything about Shelby Oaks because you are going to see it, I will be very careful about spoilers in general. We're going to have a very broad conversation about this film and some of the themes, what worked, what didn't work, and it's unfortunately a lot of stuff that didn't work, but we'll get there. Timestamps below for the news section, the non-spoilers, spoilers, what else I watched, and all that good stuff is below. But what do you say? Should we hop into the news? Let's do it. Let's talk the news. Alrighty, well, our first piece of news is a sad piece of news about Star Wars, and I can't believe I'm disappointed we didn't get a Star Wars project, but this week, Adam Driver as well as Steven Soderbergh confirmed that they were working on a scrapped Star Wars film. So Adam Driver said he was developing a new Star Wars movie called The Hunt for Ben Solo with Steven Soderbergh. The script was done, and it was, quote, one of the coolest fucking scripts I had ever been part of. The film was set after The Rise of Skywalker. Lucasfilm loved the idea, but Disney said no. They said they didn't see how Ben Solo was alive. Keep in mind, these are the people that brought Palpatine back in The Rise of Skywalker. Rebecca Blunt, who is Steven Soderbergh's wife, actually that's her writing pseudonym, was the screenwriter. Scott Z. Burns was paid more than any other screenwriter in Lucasfilm history to complete the script, so they worked together on it. Kathleen Kennedy, Dave Filoni, and Carrie Beck were directly involved throughout development. The film had a final script, budget, and was ready to start filming before they presented it to Disney and it got rejected. So it checked all the boxes. Apparently it sounded very good. Steven Soderbergh said it was like one of the most disappointing things when he had a fully ready film and it got rejected. He hadn't really had that happen before. He said this was the first time he's had a fully formed idea shot down, and I'm very curious what the plot would have been or what the story would have been because, you know, Ben Solo gives himself up and becomes a Force ghost, I guess, in episode 9, but maybe it's a younger person that's hunting after Ben Solo, but if it's Steven Soderbergh that is coming out of his way to make a Star Wars film, like, they really should have given this a shot. And they released this statement, or someone found out how profitable every Star Wars film had been since The Force Awakens, and The Rise of Skywalker was, I mean, it made $43 million of profit, but with all things considered, like, all of the other movies were profitable. So Star Wars was very much in the dumps. And again, it's sort of funny that a lot of people point fingers and they're like, oh, Kathleen Kennedy is ruining Star Wars, when she's kind of been the champion of the franchise. Like Tony Gilroy said, she was going to bat for me with Andor, and she was responsible for Andor being what it was because there were other creators within even the Star Wars sort of team of Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau who did not like that there was no lightsabers, there was no Jedi, and they all were, you know, oh, make it more actiony and blah, 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 or, you know, make it more nostalgia, when Tony Gilroy was like, no, this is a rebellion show within the Star Wars universe, and Kathleen Kennedy fully backed him and said, we're going to do this. It sounds like it was more of a Bob Iger rejection and Disney that were rejecting, or maybe it was even before Bob Iger came back, because there was the guy before him who took over from Bob Iger, and then Bob Iger came back, so somehow Bob Iger has returned. Someone needs to make that Oscar Isaac meme, but I don't know, this is disappointing. funny. Steven Soderbergh, like just this year alone, he has 2 fantastic films. I think 3. Didn't he also make The Christophers or whatever? But that was at TIFF. And he's made 3 films this year that have all gotten positive reviews. Like Black Bag, I maintain was still so damn entertaining. I liked Presence a lot, and it was very experimental. And I get that, it was slow, but it was one of the most fun movies this year to sort of play around with the form. And if he is coming to your company and saying, hey, I want to make a Star Wars movie when the franchise is kind of dead in the water, give him the opportunity. Like, why not? And Adam Driver saying he wants to come back for Star Wars. Adam Driver is like one of the highest rated actors right now, even if I think he's, a little bit overrated in some ways. I mean, he's going to be the star of Heat 2 probably, and you're shutting him down from not making another Star Wars. The rest of them didn't want to come back after The Rise of Skywalker, pretty much. Like, everyone was sort of done with the franchise after it, and he is happily signing up and saying, yeah, I'll do another. Like, dude, just a wasted opportunity. And it was really fun to actually see the internet sad that something didn't happen with Star Wars. And it's been an okay year for Star Wars fans, of a lot of people celebrating Andor and saying how amazing of a show it was. And then you have people actually upset that an Adam Driver led project didn't come to fruition, because it does sound really cool. I don't know. I might have to watch the sequel movies again soon, because I've only seen The Rise of Skywalker once and it was in theaters, but I'm really bummed that the Hunt for Ben Solo didn't come to fruition. Maybe it was like the Knights of Ren that were looking for him as a Force ghost, or he's on the run, or who even knows what the plot details are or what the story is. I haven't looked that up, and I haven't seen any quotes or any real revelations. I'm guessing this information came out because the NDA that they all signed probably ended this week, or Adam Driver is doing a Ryan Reynolds Deadpool type thing where he's just leaking it because he's trying to force the hand of Disney to see the uproar and be like, okay, well, we got to put it out now. I don't know. If that does work, hell yeah. And if we can make it not look like gray Disney Plus slop like The Mandalorian and Grogu does, I will be a happy boy. But let's move into our next story. Tatiana Maslany and Tim Heidecker will star in a dark comedy film called The Comedy Hour. The film follows a late-night talk show host who is forced to produce his show as America collapses. But when a robot is assigned as his co-host, America begins to love the robot more than him. I really like this team up. I think Tatiana Maslany is a fantastic actress. She was really good in The Monkey. She's hilarious in She-Hulk. She was in, what was that TV show called? Like Orphan Black? Was it Orphan Black? It was a sci-fi show where she had a bunch of twins and it was very sort of creepy, spooky, but she's a fantastic actress. I actually think she's a really great performer. And before Shelby Oaks, they showed the new Oz Perkins trailer for later this year called Normal, or People, something normal folk, not normal people. That's a Sally Rooney. Yeah, no, I can't remember what it was called, but it looks really cool. And Tim Heidecker, I'm excited to see him take on this role as a little more drama, or if it's going to be like a comedy satire. And it's the guy that's writing it and directing it is apparently very funny. So this sounds like a cool idea, and I really like the premise that it is this, late night talk show host, which is a dying medium in of itself, before we even get to the AI or a robot aspect, that like late night hosts are being taken off of the air by the government, or they're being canceled by their studio or their overhead that are being encouraged by the government to be canceled. But I love the robot aspect of like, oh, well, what if we just had like this AI gimmick or this robot gimmick sort of take over the show, or the robot sidekick that everyone is starting to love more, and we're forgetting about the human that's actually behind the show and someone that's making an effort as a human. So it sounds funny. I like that it's a dark comedy. It's going to probably get pretty crazy, and I'm excited to see how Tim Heidecker can fit into that role. And Tatiana Maslany getting to do comedy again is really great, because she was funny in The Monkey, as sort of middling as that movie was, and I wasn't crazy about it. It did have a lot of funny moments, and I maintain that she was hilarious in She-Hulk. I really liked a lot of that show as sort of gray and, again, Disney Plus slop that it sort of looked. She was very funny in that show and sort of poking fun at the medium. So I'm excited for this. I think it's a very, very, very promising thing. But our next story, an adult animated G.I. Joe and Transformers crossover series is in the works. Based on Robert Kirkman's Energon Universe comic series, will be adult focused in a similar vein to Invincible. I think this is a really good idea. Transformers 1, even if it didn't do phenomenally at the box office, it was a like child animation film, versus Invincible. People love Invincible. It's very widely watched. It's extremely popular. G.I. Joe, they've been crying out for someone to do something with with G.I. Joe for years now, and there was that little tease at the end of Transformers Rise of the Beasts, I think it was, that it turns out it was G.I. Joe, and I guess they just showed the card at the end. I haven't seen the post-credit scene. I didn't really grow up like a giant Transformers fan. That wasn't a cartoon that was being played in my house. It was much more Simpsons, King of the Hill, and Batman the animated series, along with like Justice League the animated series or Justice League Unlimited. So Transformers is a bit of a blind spot for me. I don't mind the Michael Bay movies. I've seen the first 3, but I don't know. Maybe I'll have to just binge them all. It's one of those series that I'm like, I need to binge the Transformers series. I need to binge the Fast and Furious series because I've only seen the first 6 or 7. And then also I should watch the second G.I. Joe film. So it's all these big tentpole productions or these big tentpole franchises that I've sort of skipped out on. This sounds cool, and I think making it a little more adult focused, I'm hoping people will turn up for it. The fact that it's a TV series I think is very promising, and it might draw more viewers in because it feels like TV shows are a little more forgiving when it comes to the financials of it, because realistically on all of this streaming nonsense that's going on, there's no profit or there's no repercussions for a thing not making its money back, because it's like, how does streaming actually make its money back? Why do you think there's all these price changes every year? It's because these things are not profitable. That's why Netflix, that's why Disney Plus, that's why Amazon Prime, that's why HBO just this week said that HBO Max is going to be having a price change. My Disney Plus went up by like $30 this year. Why do you think all these things are happening? Because it's not a sustainable model. That's why they're literally going back to cable and offering packages and running ads. That's the name of the game. They've sort of painted themselves into a corner, and now they're greenlighting series instead of films, and directors and actors are moving into TV because there's more money in it, because studios are willing to just throw cash at television shows rather than films because they know there's a public perception with box office numbers. But anyways, back to this. I think it's a cool crossover. There's been comics that have been Transformers and G.I. Joe crossovers, right? That's been a thing before, but now they're actually going to do it in the live action films. I'm sure we're going to see this pretty soon. I like that it's sort of Invincible inspired, and Robert Kirkman's comic is being used for it. So we'll see how this even pans out. But our final story of the day, Netflix is developing a TV series about the Kennedy family, described as the American version of The Crown. Michael Fassbender has been cast as Joseph Kennedy Sr. I did not know that JFK's father, I guess, was a politician, or who was he? But as for sort of a Crown spinoff in some ways, I guess, because the Kennedys were in The Crown. I watched that season where they showed up at Buckingham Palace, right? Am I imagining this, or am I insane? I feel like there is when the era during the 60s when she first becomes queen, or she's already been queen, right? But I think it's very interesting that Netflix is moving into this other way, because The Crown, whether you like the royal family or not, whether you're like me and you hate the royal family, because I very much hate the royal family, The Crown was the award season juicer for Netflix. Like every year they had all of their actors nominated, all of their directors nominated, the show was nominated for everything, costuming, makeup, all of that stuff. It was just like nominations, stat padding. So it feels like this is another opportunity for them to keep the acclaim going, and also there was definitely an audience for it. The Crown was extremely popular every single year. People loved The Crown, and they need that big production to draw people back to Netflix. I mean, Stranger Things coming to an end. They've had a bunch of shows come to an end, so they need to have that big title that they can promise. Like Ozark isn't around anymore, so now they'll have The Kennedys, or they'll probably call it Kennedys or The Kennedys or something like that. There's no Crown thing to call it. Michael Fassbender as a choice is interesting. I mean, he's a little older now, so it is cool that he's going to be playing Kennedy Sr., and I'm assuming that'll be the focus of the first season, is like an older Kennedy Sr., and then his son's coming up through the ranks. I don't know. Are they going to make it all the way up to RFK Jr.? That would be insane. Who's going to play RFK Jr. on on a Netflix series? Who's going to play the brain worm as well? Probably Chris Pratt. But okay, I think we should probably hop into Shelby Oaks. I don't want to waste any more time. Once again, timestamps below if you only want to listen to the non-spoiler section. If you want to skip the entire discussion, go to What Else I Watched. I have some good stuff to talk about there, but let's do it. Let's talk Shelby Oaks. Shelby Oaks is a 2025 horror mystery film coming in at 1 hour, 45 minutes, directed and written by Chris Stuckmann, who, if you don't know, Chris Stuckmann is a very popular YouTube film critic. He has been on YouTube for years, like probably 15 or 10 years easily, and this is his feature film debut. The budget was 1.4 to 2.8 million because it was funded through Kickstarter, and then Neon came on the process because we're going to talk about all of that today. It's a very interesting thing. It currently has 59% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 60% audience score, 5.9 on IMDb, 2.9 average on Letterboxd with a 3-star mode. The synopsis for the film: a woman's obsessive search for her missing sister leads her into a terrifying mystery at the hands of an unknown evil. The film stars Camille Sullivan as Mia, Brendan Sexton III as Robert, Michael Beach as Detective Burke, Keith David as Morton Jacobson, Robin Bartlett as Norma, Charlie Talbert as Wilson, Emily Bennett as Janet, and Sarah Dern as Riley. So here are my initial thoughts on Chris Stuckmann's directorial debut. It's certainly a feature film debut, and there are, I think, some glimpses of possible potential or promise or whatever you want to call it in the future, but I think this was an incredibly weak film that is very sort of derivative or sort of just being other films, and there wasn't tons I was interested in here, and it's a real bummer to say that because obviously there was a huge, public support thing behind this film, which let's just get into. I think it's really interesting for you guys to hear if you don't know how this movie actually came to be. Well, in July 2021, YouTuber and film critic Chris Stuckmann signed on to write and direct a supernatural horror mystery film titled Shelby Oaks for Paper Street Pictures. The film is based on an online marketing campaign depicting a series of found footage videos about a fictional paranormal investigative team named the Paranormal Paranoids, as well as some personal things that happened to Chris Stuckmann in his life that I will share in the spoiler section because I think you actually shouldn't know. The production was scheduled to begin in late 2021 but was delayed due to insufficient funds and a potential strike by the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. Funding was achieved via a Kickstarter campaign that began on the March 1st, 2022 launch day. On March 21st, Shelby Oaks became the most funded horror film project on Kickstarter after raising $650,000. The campaign crossed the $1 million mark from 11,200 backers by March 25th. Then, during post-production, by August 2023, post-production was suspended due to the SAG-AFTRA strike. In January 2024, Stuckmann announced that post-production was finished and they were in the studio searching for film festivals to screen the film. That's when Mike Flanagan, who you might know from Haunting of Hill House, Bly Manor, or all that stuff, signed on as an executive producer, as well as Trevor Macy and Melinda Nishioka under their production company Intrepid Pictures. In July 2024, Neon then acquired the film for worldwide distribution rights to the film, and I believe they even gave them some more money to film a couple more scenes that were filmed just this year. Like, I think literally March 2025 they were back to filming. So it's a very crazy journey to how this all came to be, and whether the film is good or not, it got made, as Zack Snyder said, I guess, or whatever the infamous quote was. And you really do have to admire this whole thing that happened, and they were doing a bunch of behind the scenes stuff while it was being filmed, and Chris Stuckmann was bringing in all of the Kickstarter people to the process and talking to the actors, and it was just like a really cool movement that sort of went down. And it was fun going to the theater to watch this on a Thursday night showing where it was actually sold out and it was silent. Everyone was very locked in. But having said that, people were leaving the theater every 5 minutes to go to the bathroom, and it's a 91-minute movie. Don't get a large Diet Coke at the theater if you can't make it through an hour-and-a-half long horror film, where if you missed any scene in this film, it did feel like you're probably, not going to know what's happening in the next scene, even though there is a lot of this film that is really empty space. But let's start with the performances, of course, with Camille Sullivan as Mia, who is the sister investigating where Riley went. She's fine. I don't find her very intriguing, and there is a real lack of connection with the characters of this film. I didn't really feel like I empathized for them or I wanted them to win. It's just that they have to win because they're the heroes of the story, or we have to cheer for them because they're the good guys. But I never actually felt like I loved these people. I wanted to cheer for them because it's such a weird thing to try and explain out loud. I literally literally did not care about these people. I was like, yeah, I want them to find the missing girl, but I'm not like rooting for them or personally love these people. And Mia's not a very accessible character, and maybe that comes from Riley being the focus of the first 20 to 25 minutes of this film, and then the perspective switches to Mia, and I was like, oh, I was like just buying into Riley's whole deal, but now she's missing, obviously. So I hadn't seen any trailers for this film because I was purposefully avoiding them. Sometimes with horror movies specifically, I will skip trailers because I don't want to know. Infamously, in the big 2025 horror movies love to spoil their premise, love to spoil the twists, so I was avoiding that. But Sarah Dern as Riley Brennan, I think she's actually pretty good. She's playing this fake paranormal investigator on a YouTube show, and then she goes missing, and it's really interesting what she does with her performance in some moments, but it's, again, very sparse, and the material they're working with is very one-dimensional, it's very shallow, and it's just sort of straight A to B. And then Keith David shows up at one point for one scene in this entire movie. He shows up as a prison warden, or a former prison warden of a closed down prison warden that actually is Shawshank, where they filmed, and that's very cool. But yeah, he has one scene and then he never shows up again, and his scene is pretty rough. Like it's very bad. He plays the very cliched rugged warden who puts a Mickey of rum into his coffee, and it was just kind of a goofy scene. But let's talk about Chris Stuckmann as a director and his debut as a feature film director. I do think this movie lacks flair, or it lacks a little bit of the it factor, and it feels very stiff. The directing is very moody, and they're very much focusing on the atmospheric element of it, but Chris Stuckmann's story doesn't feel like it's letting you in, or it's not really trying to shake you. It's kind of relying on jump scares, and it's relying on what you're seeing rather than what you're feeling. There wasn't a lot of feeling that I get from his directing style, but even his writing, like, I didn't feel that there was a lot of love between Mia and Riley. It's just like she's obsessed with finding her sister, of course, but it feels like more of a duty. The way she's written and how she speaks about her sister, I think because this movie is so embedded in cliche and maybe some homages as well, because I've seen the amount of people on, Letterboxd or Reddit being like, oh, it reminds me of this other movie, or oh, they do this one thing from another movie, and maybe that's working against it as well, that it's in certain elements, maybe it's not as original as it could be, and I wouldn't call it derivative because I don't know those other references. There is a very fragile line between derivative and an homage. Like, even earlier this year, there's the film Freaky Tales, which I absolutely loved. Some people would probably call it derivative because there are certain LA films, like whether it's Pulp Fiction or not, that it's drawing from, and it's like, well, is it copying those other movies, or is it a fun homage? And I think you have to be very careful as a storyteller or anything in the arts of, if you're drawing inspiration from works that you've loved, there is a fine line between copying and pretty much being derivative versus doing an original take that's inspired by other things. And this movie, to me, did not feel like a very original, unique voice. I think a lot of this focus of this movie as well has been on Chris Stuckmann himself and the Kickstarter campaign, and it's been, honestly, more in a good way, it's been more focused on the Kickstarter campaign and like, wow, this is so cool that a YouTuber directing a feature film, and that's fine. We had that earlier this year as well with Bring Her Back, the Filipu brothers, who we're going to talk about later. They were YouTubers as well. They were Raka Raka, was that their name on YouTube? And of course, there's been film critics who have become directors notoriously. So this is, another person in a long line of people that have moved into a new space. It just doesn't feel like there's a lot of bursting energy or bursting talent. I think there's a lot of learning and a lot of growing that needs to be done as a director and a writer from Chris Stuckmann. That's not to say that there isn't stuff in here that I didn't enjoy, because the last 25 minutes of this movie, and I'm not going to say obviously what happens, but they were the most interesting, or not even interesting, the most exciting, because stuff is actually happening. But they are also simultaneously the stupidest 25 minutes of the film, where things are kind of just going crazy, things are falling apart, it's sort of stopped making sense, and I was just whatever. I sort of just gave in and was like, this is the big twist. Most of this movie is an investigation, and it's Mia looking at photos, walking through dark locations, and it's all, flashlights malfunctioning, or fog and steam and someone's breath, and it's all just atmosphere, but it's not even intriguing or like, ooh, I love the slow burn of this, because because it looks so good. And I hate using the B word, but I was a little bored during this movie. There's a lack of substance here to really chew on. And the personal connections sometimes can help you get through those slow burn elements. Like even a film like Zodiac, where it's a pretty slow burn Zodiac, but I love the characters and I love the dynamics of the characters, so I want to see where they end up. There's none of that in this film. I really did not care about the characters. I didn't care about the world that we're in. I'm not interested in the world we're in, of this like YouTube paranormal thing going on and what people think of Riley Brennan because she was a YouTuber. And I don't know, it's very stale and it's very difficult to sink my teeth into. It's a very patchy piece of work where the first 25 minutes of this movie are sort of found footage, and it's a Netflix like true crime documentary style thing happening where someone is coming to talk about Riley Brennan and the disappearance of her. Then something crazy happens and we follow the investigation of Mia through the film instead of through the true crime documentary. And that's when it switches to, Chris Stuckmann's directorial perspective. I wasn't interested in this true crime thing, and it starts off feeling very hokey, and it can sort of leave it a bad taste in your mouth. They're trying to lure us into the film in a really interesting idea of like, oh, what if we just straight up start with a true crime documentary style and then we switch to an actual narrative feature film style. It's a good idea in theory, I guess, but it was very stale and made me a little bit uninterested, because if you're someone like me who doesn't like true crime, or you don't like those true crime documentaries on Netflix that feel very fake and exploitative, that's just to me. I know other people love those and maybe they would love the opening of this film. It was very hard for me to buy in, and I was getting a little bit bored because it is just information dumping for the first 25 minutes, as well as some very bad newscasting acting where we have like news anchors that are telling the story of Riley Brennan. I was almost giggling in how bad the fake newscasters are in this movie. It feels very amateur film, and of course it's a Kickstarter film, so it's not like some big budget, 20th Century Fox or Disney, A24 that is behind this. This was not a Neon film when they were filming that stuff, and it's brutal to watch, to be honest, at times. And those opening 20 minutes alone made it feel very rocky in its pacing, because I was like, wait, what are we doing? What are we going to be in this narrative format the entire time? But then we switch the perspective, and then I have to buy into Mia as a sister, which I don't really care at first. It's just the pacing of this movie was all over the place, because like I said, this could just be walking through dark spaces with a flashlight, the movie. That is probably 80% of the runtime is Mia walking through rooms, pointing her flashlight into a corner with a dark space, and someone might be nearby, or something might be nearby, and then she gets spooked and nothing happens, or something happens and we learn something, but it's not explained. And I usually am fine with movies being ambiguous and wanting to let the viewer really think about what they're watching, but this movie is like the antichrist of explaining films. Nothing is explained. There's the big bad of this movie. I genuinely have no clue how to even explain it in spoilers. Like, I don't know what that was. And that's where the last 25 minutes sort of lost me, because I'm like, wait, what is going on? What is happening? There are some interesting themes with those villains that they're trying to talk about that come from Chris Stuckmann's personal life, whether there is, religious entrapment or cults or the strict sort of views of religion that can outcast people, communities that can outcast people because they are interested in other things. And there were little glimpses of a personal story here that I was like, oh, there is something very real in all of this. And Chris Stuckmann's life was very real, and at least he is channeling it in his work in very sparse moments. It's so rare in this movie where I felt like, oh, that was a very personal string that just happened there. And also isolation within a family, because some people just don't understand what you're going through, whether it's in a marriage or even missing person cases, I think are very interesting in real life as well. How some people, when they want to believe something and they're super desperate, you can see things and you can think that you're crazy, or you start latching on to conspiracy. And that's how conspiracy theories happen in the first place, is people are desperate for an answer, so they turn to whatever and they latch onto things to try and help explain. It's very much of that family of films where people are being labeled as crazy by their community or by their loved ones because of what they're seeing. And I do like some of the themes that are at work here, but again, the execution in this film and the proportions are kind of all off. Now, having said that, was there anything about this movie that I liked? Yes, I would say the score, which is done by the Newton brothers, is actually very good. There are some moments where I didn't really care what was happening on screen, but the score was very good, and I was like, you know what? It's kind of cool that he got the Newton brothers to do the score, and it sounds at least like a very professional film and like a higher budget or a big budget movie. Not, I was going to say higher class movie. What does that even mean? But it sounds like a big budget film. Props to him for getting that done. There are dogs in this film, which I thought were CGI, and allegedly they're not. That was very confusing to me because there are CGI things in this film, which you can tell are CGI, but then there's real life things in this film, which I thought were CGI. And I think the cinematography in this film is not great at times. It's not like the most gorgeously shot film in certain scenes, so I don't think it really lends itself to what they are shooting. But before we get into 2 stars and a wish and then the spoiler section, I want to rank these YouTubers turned filmmakers. So we have the Philippou brothers, Dan Trachtenberg, who does all of like the Predator films, all the new ones at least, and then Chris Stuckmann. In third, to no one's surprise, is Chris Stuckmann. I mean, he's only done one feature film. It's not very good. This is a directorial debut. There's tons of directorial debuts that kind of stink, and you learn so much from your first movie. I'm sure he'll get another shot at one very soon even. I wouldn't be surprised if it's already in the works that he has a new film. Maybe with another writer would help him if he did not write the film and he just saw a story that he liked. In second, I'm going to go the Philippou brothers because I think Talk to Me, their directorial debut, is a very good film. I watched it for the first time this year before Bring Her Back. I thought it was so entertaining. I thought it was very flashy and it's very deep. It talks about a lot of really cool things that young people go through, whether they lose someone in their life and the isolation that comes with that. And I think Bring Her Back, you know, it wasn't great, but there is some actual sauce and style to it. But in first, I'm of course going Dan Trachtenberg because I loved Prey. Predator Badlands is coming out soon and it looks fantastic, as well as the Killer of Killers. The other Predator film this year was really good. So Dan Trachtenberg in first, but let's get into 2 stars and a wish. Star number 1, there is some genuinely well shot scenes from a directorial point of view. I think some of the shots he's doing, they're tense in very slim moments. Like it's not a very good film when you step back and look at it as a whole, but there are little bits of scenes that I'm like, oh, okay, at least he did something cool there that feels very experienced. Star number 2, again, the score is very good and I think it's very fitting for what we're seeing on screen, but it's also doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And my wish, it's very scattered. Things just feel very random and they don't have a logical flow, so I think a lot of rewriting could have benefited this film by building on the characters, making them feel more nuanced instead of just, she's a sister looking for her sister, he's the husband that doesn't understand. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of nuance or places to explore thematically in this film. Everything feels very black or white. But overall, look, it's cool that this project got made. I think Shelby Oaks is a very interesting moment for the YouTuber filmmaker space to see that these kind of Kickstarter campaigns can take off. And it felt like a very big celebration for the Chris Stuckmann fandom. And that's something that, you know, the movie got made and it can never be taken away from him. And I'm sure he has a very bright future as a director. But Shelby Oaks was a very rough watch. I found a lot of it to just be, frankly, too slow for my liking. I don't mind slow films, but it was just too slow. I gave it 2.5 stars out of 5. Let's move into spoilers. All right, spoilers for Shelby Oaks. So, as a child, Chris Stuckmann was in Jehovah's Witness, or he was a Jehovah's Witness. He was in the Jehovah's Witness community. How do you say that? He was a Jehovah's Witness, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And this movie is very much about a community that is very harsh on people that are exploring other ways of living or are exploring the non-traditionally believed things. And as a child, his sister was also shunned from the community. Chris Stuckmann, you could interpret the character Mia as trying to save her sister from evil, I guess, or because Mia's missing and she's under the influence of the devil, or I guess it's the devil. There's some metaphor there where Chris Stuckmann is trying to be the hero by saving his sister, or what he thinks of his sister, that she's gone missing because she is shunned from the community. So it is a personal story. There is personal things behind this. You can tell most of the time, but that's just the motivation behind the story, or sort of a little bit of personal background behind the writing. But let's get into some actual sort of nitty-gritty spoiler stuff. First, I have a nitpick that this really pissed me off watching this movie. So what's sort of the inciting incident of this film is, other than Riley going missing, is when they're filming this true crime doc, this guy shows up at the front door and shoots himself in the head. We switch to the narrative perspective rather than the true crime doc. Mia is sitting around the house with the guy's blood on her face all day, probably like 13 hours, and she doesn't go and shower. She doesn't go to the police station. A guy just killed himself at your door, put a gun to his head and blew his brains out, and they're not like, okay, we just need to bring you in and we just want to like hear what happened and all that stuff. They just let her stay at home. And I feel like I'm cinema sins right now, but it just felt like, why does this make any sense? I don't think the police would just let you hang out at home after that, and then your husband wouldn't be like, hey, okay, well, let's get you in the shower and wash your face off because you literally have a dead man's blood on you. It was just one of the weirdest pieces of writing in this film. But let's talk about all of the reveals that we get throughout the film, starting with hating your children that are born from a religion. So Riley goes missing, but she's actually been kidnapped or lured in by the devil of the north or something like that. They don't really explain who the guy, or what is it, Ichabus or something crazy like that. I don't know. It's just nobody verbally explains anything. It's all just looking at pages and books, and then we have to piece it together. So she has been abducted and they've been trying to get her pregnant, I guess, and she hasn't been able to carry to term. So her dreams that she had, or was it Mia's dreams? I think it was Mia's dreams, dreaming up this like almost cemetery with these X's or these shapes, and it's where they're burying all of the babies, I guess, or the fetuses that aren't, carried out to full term. I don't even know how to fully explain it, but a huge sort of motivator or a theme of this film is the resentment that a parent can have when they are carrying out like a religious birth. To Mia, it's, oh my God, this is a blessing. We haven't been able to have children because it's never been the right time and we've tried before, but now that Riley is back and she's so happy that her sister's back, even though her sister is literally a shell of a human being and she just doesn't seem to care about her at all. But they're keeping the baby and Riley's at home after being missing for like 4 years. So I didn't really fully get that, and it just feels like the ending of this film is very choppy and rushed, and I don't like to sort of question the logical elements of films and be like, well, actually, they didn't turn the light off or they didn't close the door when they went in the house, and it's kind of lame. I don't know. It just feels like a lot of this is very, we'll just like brush past it and because we need to get to this final scene. But the theme of a parent hating their child because of the religious ties that are with it, or they've been forced into, I don't know, reproducing or whatever you want to say, that's sort of an interesting theme. There's evil dogs in this film that she keeps having visions of, Mia, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Every scene is Mia walking through an empty building or a haunted prison or all of these paranormal locations that her sister was looking at with her YouTube investigative team, or the place where she died, like that cabin, and she's going to all these different places and she keeps seeing these dogs that show up who are, I guess, the guardians, or they are like servants of the devil that she's, I don't even know how to explain it. Again, there's like so much of this movie that I just didn't retain because I'm like, oh, okay, there was a devil involved and it doesn't really feel thought through. This is one of the sort of least logical or least explained films I've watched this year, and that doesn't necessarily make it the worst film of the year because there are moments here where I was almost entertained, but it just feels like there's so little lore explanation, and usually I'm not a big fan of lore dumping in horror films where it's like, oh, all of a sudden we need to explain the backstory of all of these characters and we need to tell you the history of this church that's haunted and blah, 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 blah. Whereas in this movie, they show us a couple pages from a book and they just keep showing the same symbols that are carved on these trees because both Riley and the devil figure carve their shapes on the trees, which I found really interesting. I thought that was a cool touch, but the dogs and the devil in general, I was like, what is going on? Like, who is this devil? What is the representation of this devil? What is the significance of it? Who is the old lady that is kidnapping Riley? And then there's also the other son, William or whatever his name is, that Riley and him were connected in some ways, and spirituality is forcing them into this connection, I guess, is the overall takeaway. Because when that guy comes to their house and shoots himself in the head, the only thing he says to me at the door is, she finally let me go. And at first I thought he was talking about Riley. I think he's talking about Nora is her name, the older lady that has them trapped in their house. house and is like a servant of the devil, I guess you could say, that they're sort of being forced into this relationship or this connection. So that's where the theme of like forced marriages through religion or spirituality and forced pregnancies or forced reproduction because of religion and all that stuff is coming to fruition a little bit. It does make sense. I will give Chris Stuckmann, I'll give him credit. It's an idea, but it doesn't feel like it's fully realized, or not even fully realized, I guess. You could just say none of it's explained. She seems out of it at the end of the film until Mia comes to get her. So is it like only family members and only the ones you love can pull you out of cults or these beliefs that may take over you? It's just, sure, I guess that makes sense. What I did sort of like is that Mia as a child was also having these visions or these dreams, but she didn't tell anyone. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way to talk about how even if you're not necessarily part of those indoctrinated things, or you're not like Riley, who is having these visions and is under the spell of the devil or under the spell of religion, I guess you could say, that you still can have religious experiences, or you can still have like these higher level visions. There is an idea there of, even if I'm not the person that is stuck in that cult or that way of thinking, you can still have like brushes with that experience. And that's how Mia sort of goes through this investigation. And even Mia has her own beliefs or her way of living, and she doesn't realize at the end of the film that the baby is clearly evil. And again, she brings the baby home, and her sister, who has been missing for how long, like 4 years or something like that, she brings her home after a day. There's one scene in the hospital and they're like, yep, she seems fine, and then they bring her home. The police don't have anything to ask. It was one of the weirdest things of like, oh well, no, we need to get them at home, and then Mia just, sort of bumps into her sister, and Riley falls out of a window and dies, and then the movie ends. It's one of the weirdest sort of wrap-ups, and the true crime girl comes back. She immediately comes back to the house to finish the documentary with, which I thought was so inappropriate. I'm like, her sister's been home a day since she was abducted, and they're already like, yeah, get the true crime crew back in here. It's one of the silliest things I have seen in a film this year. There's just so much unexplained lore in this film that just feels very underdeveloped. It's all very shallow, but that's really all I have to say about Shelby Oaks. It's a very fascinating directorial debut that is a interesting moment in YouTuber critic culture, I guess you could say, because of the Kickstarter campaign. But I think I'll wrap up my thoughts there. Let's move into what else I watched. Alrighty, lots to cover in what else I watched. First up, I want to say I am a little bit obsessed with Battlefield 6 at the moment. It is so damn fun. The game modes are just like crazy intense, and it's so nice having a video game that I like consistently want to play again, because I was a huge gamer growing up. Like in high school and university, I was addicted to video games, and the last few years it's just trailed off a little bit because there's been, I don't know, like not less stuff I've been obsessed with, but I'm starting to make more time for it. So Battlefield 6, if you're a Battlefield fan in the past and you're looking to get into one that's sort of in the spirit of Bad Company 2 or like Battlefield 4 and all of those ones, the really fun old ones, totally get Battlefield 6. But I want to tell you about Batman: The Court of Owls Volume 1 and Volume 2. So I was reading The Court of Owls before my Batman video comes out on Friday, Halloween, and I've never read Scott Snyder's run, but they are genuinely amazing A+ writing. Psychological and so down to earth and very fragile, but the art is amazing. I think the art is partially done by Greg Capullo, but it sort of changes from artist to artist, whatever story is being told. And I seriously loved it so much. I really want to get like the whole Scott Snyder run. I have a bunch of other new 52 Batman stories that I'll work my way through, but I was really in the deep dive of Batman stuff this week as I was working on the script for my video and sort of getting my ideas out. So we'll have a couple Batman stories to talk about as well in the movie section, because I watched some animated films. Court of Owls Volume 1, I really liked the sort of nursery rhyme coming to life, and Bruce Wayne, he is the, eccentric billionaire that's trying to revitalize Gotham, but it's this whole other spin on it with his family history and everything with his mother and father, but also his great-great-grandfather. And I really love that personal element, and I'm going to talk all about it in my YouTube YouTube video, but volume 2 with the big twist of who the villain is, I think is not my favorite. I don't love the big bad of volume 2. I like the Court of Owls themselves, and I really enjoy the concept of this secret society in Gotham that is running everything from the shadows, but I don't love the main revelation of volume 2. So I'll leave it at that because I really don't want to spoil. Experience it yourself. So let's move into television. So the Chair Company, we had episode 2, New Blood. There's 5 Rons now, and it is just such a bonkers television show. I don't know how they think of some of this stuff, and I love when they get a weird guy to be in their stuff. Like, I just love a weird dude on TV. They have this shirt salesman at the store, and he is at his limit, is what the guy says over and over again. I was crying laughing, but I love how ridiculous the premise of the show is and how this Ron guy just keeps getting in deeper and deeper, and there's this big conspiracy, and it's just so much fun having a weekly show to watch that's not a reality show, because there's always been reality shows, but I just love when you have a weekly comedy that you can sit down, enjoy. It's not an hour and 20-minute episode. It's like a quick 30 to 35-minute episode. And look, I complained about the Peacemaker run times, and sure, they could have been a little longer, but it's sometimes nice to just have a brisk watch that you can enjoy and then move on to another TV show. And I love what the Chair Company is doing. How he treats his assistant is hilarious in of itself, but there's just every episode is so jam-packed with funny, ridiculous, and great acting too. Like, Tim Robinson is honestly doing some very, very funny acting, and then there's this Italian mob guy as well in the show that is just, it's so good. You guys gotta watch the Chair Company. But this week, Gen V season 2 actually wrapped up with episode 8 called Trojan, and I think season 2 was a mostly positive, entertaining television show. I think, considering the very sad context that it was made in, with the actor that died between the seasons and they had to do a big rewrite and basically write him out of the show, they pulled it off under extremely scary circumstances or devastating circumstances, and it leads into the final season of The Boys really well. I liked the rebellion reveal in the final episode where A-Train and Starlight are coming to work with them. The main star, I can't remember what her actress's name, but she plays the blood controlling girl. I thought she was fantastic, and she honestly gave some like standout episodes this season. So are they going to do a season 3? Probably not. I feel like it will wrap up as well with The Boys, and it's sort of because the shows are merging with them all joining the rebellion in the final episode. Marie Monroe, that's her name, the main blood controlling girl. But I think it's probably going to end this season because they are wrapping it so hard into The Boys, and The Boys is obviously wrapping up, but there's going to be other spin-off shows, so I wouldn't write it off completely that they wouldn't do a season 3. But Survivor season 49 episode 5 I thought was a very good episode. Honestly, it's starting to pick up. The vote out was pretty much who I thought it was going to be, Jason. I knew they were probably just going to get him out in the end, but still, the dynamics are, and I cannot underline this enough, the 2-tribe dynamic is so much more interesting than 3 tribes. It's just when it's a bigger group and there's more chances for alliances or, team ups, it's just way more entertaining. And I like that it's actually like one tribe is dominant with the former tribe and the other one is tribe. Like one tribe has more red members, one tribe has more yellow members. And it's just fun to see how they're sort of duking it out in the 2-tribe battle with the 2 stragglers from the blue tribe, Kele. People are playing strategically, like Nate sort of fooling MC into thinking there's not a lot of time left in the sand glass thing and being like, oh yeah, we got to wrap up so we can finish this and we don't lose our vote. I thought that was just such a random move, but I was like, okay, fair enough. And Jawan fixing the rock draw to see who goes on the journey in the first place is amazing. I have no doubt people have fixed rock draws before. Next week, there is another tribe swap where they're going back to 3 groups of 4, I think it is. And the tribe dynamics look really good there, but the only thing I'm worried about is my boy Nate, who actually works at Marvel Studios. If his tribe loses, he is going home because he is going to be in the minority. Back to the 3-tribe dynamic probably for a couple episodes, and then it will be the merge. But I think 49 is picking up, and look, sometimes in the new era, I think it is hard to buy into the episodes right away because usually one tribe out of the 3 just ends up sucking, and we have to watch, the disaster tribe, and then there's the really good tribe that wins every challenge, so you don't get to know those cast members, and then there's like the second tribe that you kind of get to know, and then we're just stuck with the disaster tribe for like 4 episodes while they suck. Versus when it's a two-tribe dynamic, you can focus way more on both tribes, and it's a little more even in challenges most of the time, I will say. Not all of the time. Sometimes there is one tribe that is absolutely disastrous. That's how you get a Stephanie LaGrosso one tribe member. I think 49 is picking up. I'm confident that the rest of the season will probably be pretty good unless Red just completely steamrolls. But next week, Shannon is going home. You heard it here first. Bookmark it. But my final TV show of the week, Nirvana, the band, the show. I watched the original web series. I checked out the first episode while I was walking at the gym. They're like 10 to 13 minute episodes, and you can watch them for free on their website. So I told you guys that during the TIFF episode, I watched Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, and it was my second favorite movie at the festival. Hilarious 4.5 out of 5-star comedy that just felt so fresh and a great Back to the Future parody. So check that out when it comes out in February. Well, the TV show was absolutely electric, and it's like, again, 10 to 12 minute episodes, so you can really flash through them. And Matt Johnson is just a freak of nature. He's so funny. But let's jump into the films that I watched this week because there are 5 of them to cover. So first up is the 2015 animated film Batman vs. Robin. The Robin in the story is Damian Wayne, the son of Batman, of course, and it is a sequel to Son of Batman and Batman Bad Blood. I think those 2 films come before this one, but it's not my favorite animated film because the Court of Owls story, after having read the comic this week, there's a lot going on in there, and it feels like it's shortened a little bit too much, and there's a lot that's cut out. It doesn't feel like it's really deep enough, as well as the dialogue is just frankly really bad in the film. It's very choppy. The voice actors are not great. Like, it just feels like they're very stiff. What they're saying feels very read line for line or word for word rather than it's really being felt. The animation style, I will say, I will give it credit. It's so much better than what they're doing now with like the super thick outlines and the weird, I don't even know what animation style you would call the new one that they did for like Crisis on Infinite Earths and the Tomorrowverse, as well as Batman Hush and The Long Halloween. Or no, not Hush, because Hush, they hadn't changed it yet. But for The Long Halloween, that animation style is so ugly, and I've complained about it a lot. Many times I have mentioned the animation style of that film, or those films rather, and it's so much better in this one. Even if I don't love the suit designs and the character designs, it just feels so much more inventive and actually, I don't know, just enjoyable and not an eyesore, and it doesn't make it look like a children's cartoon, I guess you could say. But they chop out so much in Batman vs. Robin from the original Court of Owls run, which is wild because there's just huge story sections that they are avoiding, and like even the labyrinth of Batman going through the Court of Owls labyrinth where he's hallucinating and stuff, that's not really a thing. And there's no Alan Wayne or family history with the Court of Owls, and it's more Robin's almost being indoctrinated by the Talon, and that's way more a focus of the story. So they are sort of adapting it in a very different context, which I get, but it's far less entertaining, and I just didn't really love it. So I gave it 3 stars. It's not the worst animated film I've watched. It's definitely better than the Tomorrowverse stuff. But after that, I watched Batman Gotham Knight, which is not actually a film. It's a series of short stories. That's an anthology series kind of thing where it's all these different animation styles, and it's from 2008. This came out alongside The Dark Knight or within the same year, and I don't think it's not technically canon. Like, it's not meant to be canon. It's more just like a fun animated sort of variety of stories that they're showing, but it's very mythological. It's very abstract, and I liked it, but it's almost sometimes anthology stories, they're too short, and it's very brushed through. But it was fun seeing the different animation styles, and it's cool seeing like Batman in anime or Batman in like this way more abstract hand-drawn type thing, or even how people are perceiving Batman in public is really fun. Like, they see him as this bat creature that is flying through the night, or he's a technical guy in a costume, and it's very different in every vignette that they're showing. So I gave it 3 stars as well. But the next one that I watched, Batman Year One, is one of my favorite Batman stories in general. Like, the comic Year One, I think, is so fantastic. The animated film from 2011 is a little bit stiff and does take some liberties of chopping things out or rushing through certain things. And within the Year One story, I get that it's also an origin of Jim Gordon and Catwoman, but it feels like the Batman Year One film is way more a Jim Gordon story. Ben McKenzie from the Gotham TV series is actually the voice of Batman Bruce Wayne, and when I was younger, or not even when I was younger, a few years ago, I actually thought his Batman voice was interesting, but watching it this time, I was like, I don't like this. It's so forced to be lower, and I don't know, it sounds very stiff. Bryan Cranston as Jim Gordon I think is a great choice because he has a great voice, but the way he is reading the lines feels so say it word for word, and sometimes you need to adapt things from books to the live action or to the screen because people simply don't talk how they talk in books. I don't know, it's hard to explain. Like, things you can read on a page sound way better in your head than they do out loud because no one naturally talks like that, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I gave it 3.5 stars. I think the animation style in that film in particular is gorgeous, and I absolutely love it compared to what they're doing today as well. I like it even more than Batman vs. Robin, so check it out if you haven't seen it. I think I'm going to keep working my way through the 18-disc collection that I have of like Batman the 80th anniversary. But as for new releases, I saw 2 new releases this week. The first one being Good Fortune, starring Aziz Ansari, Keanu Reeves, Keke Palmer, Seth Rogen. It's directed and written by Aziz Ansari, and I was surprised how much I liked this. I was ready for it to be, I don't know, sort of all the jokes are in the trailer, and it's very underdeveloped, and why should we care what Aziz Ansari has to say, especially after the Riyadh Comedy Festival? But credit where it's due. It's a very working class comedy. It feels like a very rare type of story that's actually just so openly heart on its sleeve saying, you know, fuck AI, fuck billionaires, that it is another eat the rich story, which we have plenty of right now. But it felt very earnest, and I think Keanu is giving a hilarious performance in it. Even Aziz Ansari is pretty funny in it. Keke Palmer is the heartbeat of the story. It was a delightful time at the theaters, and I give it 3.5 stars. Check it out at the theaters or when it's on streaming at home. Definitely watch it. But the final film of the week that I'm going to talk about, Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, the Bruce Springsteen biopic starring Jeremy Allen White. It was a painfully generic biopic. Like, we're getting these black and white flashbacks to his father, you know, being violent with his family and suffering from mental illness, but then Bruce grows up and he's depressed as well, and I guess the moral of the story is Bruce Springsteen goes to therapy, and that's what's to cheer about. And even the creative process of the album that he's making, Nebraska, was not that interesting either. I just found myself really being like, oh, they're hitting all the cliche boxes of a biopic that they can, and Jeremy Allen White, I'll say it, I don't think he was good as Bruce Springsteen. His accent or his voice is changing from scene to scene. I don't know. I get that it's trying to point at he needed help and he needed to overcome his past to move on in the future, but it felt very painfully generic after, you know, we got Better Man last year, which I thought was such an original, unique take on the biopic genre. Even A Complete Unknown was extremely cliched or extremely original, but it was focused on one event and it featured fantastic performances from multiple people. So Deliver Me From Nowhere, I wasn't that intrigued from the trailers, and unfortunately it lived up to the low bar that I had set for it. I gave it 2.5 stars out of 5, and that has been what else I watched. And in fact, that's going to do it for episode 91, Shelby Oaks. A weird one this week because I was going into Shelby Oaks expecting there to be so much to talk about and there's going to be so much backstory and wow, a feature film debut from Chris Stuckmann. And honestly, after doing research and thinking about the movie, I was like, that was a bit of a nothing burger of a film. It was a pretty straightforward Kickstarter campaign that went pretty crazy and broke records, but I'm never going to watch Shelby Oaks again, to be frank. I hope that Chris Stuckmann can do a lot better in his next film. I would love to see him collab with a writer. But you know what? Let me know what you thought of Shelby Oaks. And as always, please rate and review the show 5 stars wherever you get your great podcasts like Watcher of All Things, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Acast. We are, of course, an Acast produced show. If you're on the YouTube channel, hit like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when the Batman Part 2 theory video drops this Friday. It's going to be a lot of fun. And comment down below again about Shelby Oaks. Comment your The Batman Part 2 theories. What have you been watching recently? What's your favorite film of the year? Your favorite television show of the year? If you want to get in touch with the show, you can email us watcherofallthings@gmail.com and find us on social media. Instagram and Threads are just at Watcher of All Things. The TikTok account is at watcher.of.all.things. I post on social media every single day. Go check out all of that stuff. It's a lot of fun, and find me on Letterboxd. My personal Letterboxd account is KikiJ70. That's KIKIJ70. Follow me on there. Drop a comment under one of my reviews that you found me through the show, and I will follow you back. Let's build a little community. Next week, a much better episode, I hope. Begonia, Yorgos Lanthimos' new film. I'm actually seeing it tonight on Sunday, October 26th, but it will be next week's episode as it is finally coming out everywhere on Halloween. I think it's like limited release right now, and then next week it flips to worldwide release or whatever you want to call it. But as for now, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for the love and kind messages that I get every week. Take care of yourselves. Happy Halloween, and I will see you in the next one.